all devoted around Smart Body, Smart Mind, which is my online nervous system rewire program that we run once a year. And if you have been following me and keeping up to date with all of my happenings, you will know that we are really close to starting up this program for 2020. We start officially on Monday, March 2nd. And tomorrow, Sunday, March 1st, at the end of the day Pacific time, is the closing deadline for registration. So we have been running this program. This will be the 9th time we have run this program, which means we know that this is a powerful program. We have seen the changes, the transformations, the potency, the learning, the healing from our students all around the globe. So far, people from 47 countries have joined this online program. So this is not something that is going to go away anytime soon. We are so thrilled to welcome the new members. If you are a new member, let me know if you're here chiming in today. If you're an alumni, let me know if you're chiming in today. If you're watching the replay of this after we end this video chat, thank you for being here as well. We may get this up onto the YouTube, so if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for pressing play on my YouTube channel. If you are coming in live right now, I see I've got about 7 people watching me. Let me know where you're from. Let me know who you are. I like to know who is there. And I'm going to get into some questions and just make sure I've got them right here in front of me. And as I go through these questions, I will be talking about specific features, specific pieces that you get when you do join SBSM, because it is a comprehensive program. If you haven't checked out the registration page yet, we'll pop that up on this chat in the comments so you can check that out. Even as I speak, you could probably open that up in another browser. Obviously, if you're on your phone, you can't do that. But if you are on a computer, open up another link, and as I'm talking, you can check out the program and what it entails. Now, the one thing to know about this online program is that it is not something that you have to show up on time for. We do have live calls like this at specific times, but everything is recorded, everything is uploaded to our program site, and there's no worry around showing up at the right time if you're not in the same time zone as me, because it's online learning. So you, when you join, you have a password, a username, you go into our specific Smart Body, Smart Mind website, and everything lives on that site. And this is something that I think is a little different for many of us who have never done an online program. I grew up going to universities where you go to the school, you go to your lecture, you have to show up on time, assignments have to be in on time. This is not like that. It is very different. And the beauty of online learning is that you can do this at your own pace, any time of the day, and you can take your time through it. So just wanted to make that little tiny piece of information, because we have had lots of great questions, and one of them is, what if I can't make the live calls? What if I'm going to be away for a week between this Monday, March 2nd and June 7th, which is when we end? And that's okay, because even when the program ends, the content, the curriculum, the material, the recorded live Q&As and my lecture calls, all of it stays alive on the program site. So in other words, when we finish, you can continue to learn and study and practice after we end the live session. This is really important, and it's something that I think is beautiful about the online space, is that when we end class, it doesn't end. You can continue to learn and become an apprentice and continue to apprentice under your own nervous system. So thanks, Crystal, for popping up the link to Smart Body, Smart Mind. But seriously, if you are listening and you're chiming in here, where are you from? I would love to know. And I'm just going to get to one question that has come through our Facebook group. And this is from Tina. And I will make sure that I am reading this properly. There we go. All right, Tina, if you're here, let me know. You probably are, because you just sent me this question, so I thought I'd get to it first. So your question is, can The program helps someone who has gone through 4 years of good quality psychotherapy, including EMDR, and who has devoured all of your materials. In other words, it sounds like you have watched a lot of my YouTube videos, probably these Q&A calls, my free downloads such as my ebooks and my free trainings. So you want to know is even with doing all of that and 4 years of really good psychotherapy, if this will still be beneficial. And the answer is yes. And the reason I know that is because I have had people who are my peers, my colleagues, and these people are the people who are in the Facebook group as part of SBSM. They are part of my team. They are the moderators that answer questions in our forum for SBSM. And my colleagues who have trained in Feldenkrais, which is something I've trained in somatic experiencing, in somatic practice, which is the work of Kathy Kane. Somatic experiencing, for those that you don't know, that is the work of Peter Levine. So they have got training in the exact same elements that I have, professional training. We are all in private practice, and they have found benefit from Smart Body, Smart Mind. I even saw one of our moderators, Nicole Lowe's, commented to someone just, I think last night, asking, if this will still be beneficial if they are studying somatic experiencing. And she said, hands down, yes. It actually helped her understand somatic experiencing better because I was bringing the material, the theory, into actual physical practices. And this is where I think Smart Body, Smart Mind has its unique flair, if you will. And yes, it is what I've developed, but I've taken a lot of the theory and a lot of what we would do one-on-one with someone, and I've put it into a format that you, the user, you, the student, you, the person who's maybe not trained, and those who are trained, can do it with yourself. And one of the things that I think and I've seen we lack in the therapeutic one-on-one sessions that we do, and they are important. I am not knocking therapy or seeing someone one-on-one. I still use and work with people one-on-one for my own health and well-being and prevention of troubles in my life. So, no one has ever done this work. And what I found, though, when I was in private practice is it wasn't enough to just be with someone one-on-one for that hour, maybe once a week or twice a month, depending on the frequency. Even someone that might be seeing a therapist up to 3 times a week, and I know this is the situation for some people, if that work isn't being transferred into the home life, into how we drive our cars, into how we go into public situations, if we are not able to transfer that over, it's not that the work we do one-on-one doesn't help. It does. But we need it to come into all aspects of our life, Tina. And that is where I think, even with all of the great work you've done, the practical components are highly, highly specific in Smart Body, Smart Mind. And I don't teach the practical components in my free resources to the extent that I do say in, there are some audio downloads I have, and they're the basic elements of connecting with the ground under you, noticing the environment, so orienting, maybe noticing breath but not changing it, and then blending all those together. Probably you've already been learning that and practicing that. We get much deeper into working with movements of the body, the stress organs of the body. We work with elements of breath that aren't breath work per se, but moving breath to different parts of the torso. We work at the different hormonal levels, so the kidney, adrenals. We work at the level of the brain stem, the gut. We work with healthy aggression. We work with the areas of the body called the diaphragms and all of the joints, because all of these areas, this is what stores and traps our sensation, our emotion, and of course our traumatic experiences. So I do believe that even with a lot of good psychotherapy, years even, and going through all my materials, this will still benefit you. And the reason I know, as I mentioned, my colleagues get benefit from it. And we need a practice, right? And so there's a very distinct practice with this. And from what I've seen, when we're in a course and we're moving together all as one, there's a little bit more accountability to keep that practice up. And what I'll also say is, because you have done so much prep work, your system is going to be very, very primed to take this in and really soak it up, if that makes sense. Hello, Selma. Hello, Elizabeth from Rhode Island. And then I'm just going to go into, I don't know if it is a secondary question to this. Tina. I'm not too sure what the question is around. There's something regarding someone else. So I'll get to the second question. So you say, so you have a question regarding someone who has had anorexia and over-exercising, and also osteoporosis and amenorrhea. So that's when our menstrual cycle has either slowed down completely or it's stopped. And still dealing with OCD, fear, and letting go of control of everything that involves the person being safe. Use of water, money, electricity makes the person anxious. So this is a question, I think, I'm not sure if it's for you, so apologies if I'm stumbling over my words a little bit. I'm trying to see if this is you or if you're asking for someone else. So I'll speak to this about the general. So when we are living in a sense where we have this drive, this addiction to exercise, to limit our food intake, and then of course the repercussions of that are osteoporosis, or they can be, and they also can be, again, with a female human losing our menstrual cycle. The reason why, just a little bit of biological side note, is when we don't have enough fat on our body, enough body fat, and enough nutrition in our cells, in our bones, the hormonal system will pick up on this, and it will know that female would not be able to carry a human for 9 months. We wouldn't be able to gestate that organism such that it could come to full term. And so what the body does is, it's quite smart, is it stops the menstrual cycle, and it stops the capacity for the uterine lining to have an organism grow and sustain. Now, that aside, what drives a person to harm their system that way is often, and again, this is, just from what I've seen, it falls into the person needing to keep control. I'll speak to that. So when we have had an upbringing that has been very traumatic, very stressful, very adverse, where, let's just say, the environment was scary and not safe, and usually it's because of our parental structures. Not always, but typically that's the case. It could also be the school system, it could be siblings that were very mean to us, but usually the parents are a part of that. So if we grew up in an environment where things were very unsafe, we as that human, seeing this unsafety, and all humans are sensitive to energy and to threat, we will shift our own person, who we are, so that we don't get into more trouble. And in shifting who we are, we have to control who we are. We have to control our emotions. We have to control our experience, our behavior, our exuberance, our creativity. We will shift who we are so that we stay safer within this unsafe environment. And so if we think about that, in order to do that, we have to get very controlled. And by control, I mean stay safe, very contained. The trouble with this is that when we have to stay in control with all these things in our life, we also then will control things that are under our control, like our food, how we exercise. And so we see a lot of individuals, and this often starts in teenage years, but there's a spectrum there. But a child will say, I can't control my parents' rage, or their emotional disconnection, or the trauma that I'm seeing, or what I'm feeling in my system. So I'm going to control what I eat because I can do that, right? Most of the time in severe neglect, you don't hear stories of kids being force-fed food that they don't want. They will eat how they want to eat, and one of the ways of controlling something is controlling food, either being very picky and very specific, or just saying I'm not going to eat anything, or overeating and then purging, which we would see in bulimia. So there's this interesting behavior that starts to occur, it's really the word, to help a person soothe themselves, to help a person stay in control. The trouble with this is if we don't heal those wounds of unsafety as we become adult, those food practices that may be not enough nutrition with yourself, this is what the question was, not enough nutrition, we then don't get the nutrients we need, and then our system starts to suffer. So one of the important things to understand is that getting our health back, being able to have that having to be in control move to being able to let go of a little bit of control, means that we have to build stronger, solid nervous system foundations. We have to learn how to reconnect back to this body and restore more safety to it, more resiliency to it, more capacity to it. And often that we know that takes time, and we need to work at that level, that deep safety level that is in our cells, in our biology. So there will be, I'm just making sure I'm reading this correctly here. You also mentioned OCD. So again, obsessive compulsive disorder is often a need for a person to keep things in check, right? Kind of that classic lining up things perfectly, making sure that their hands are always washed, double checking things. Again, it is this behavior, it's a behavior that is being driven by unresolved survival stress. I'll say that one more time because it's important. It is a behavior, this obsessive compulsiveness, it's a hard one to say, to stay in control, to keep things in control. But that behavior is there because something within the system is not safe. And so it is trying to find as many ways as possible to stay safe, to stay in control. So that is one element to that. So I hope that answers, I'm not sure if that answered a question or it was just an interest around what that is and how that impacts the nervous system. At the end of the day, these, we would call them social anxieties. You also mentioned these addictions, these needs to keep things in perfect check. They are, in a sense, behavioral in a way of making us feel safer. The trouble is while keeping things in control and let's say maybe limiting our food intake, they seem safer because they're keeping things under our own control. If they're harming our ability to live and stay healthy and give ourselves nutrition, they're not safe. They're actually unsafe, even though we think that they're creating more safety. It's a bit of a loop there. And so part of the process of healing this is really getting back to those base level roots of how did that system get wired in the first place? Why did it need to have that level of control? And is it possible to start to add in more resources into the system, more ways of settling and soothing and knowing that actually it is safe here and I don't need to have these things in certain places or limit my food intake in a certain way, that we need to find that resiliency and that capacity more at that organic level rather than the external level of controlling certain things in our lives, our behaviors, and even the people that we hang out with will also dictate how we feel fear around certain people and comfortable with others. It's very common when we have been, it's very common when we've grown up in a abusive, stressful, chaotic environment that is our map of safety, and I say that with quotes. That abusive, toxic, harmful environment to us is safe. It's what we know. So it's not necessarily that it's safe, it's that it's what we know. And so that imprint is how we know to exist in the world. But then when we seek that out, we get re-traumatized, we get re-abused, we get into situations that are toxic and not good for us. And it's because that map was originally written when we were young and we haven't created another way of living. And so part of this rewiring process requires that we know that there's going to be it's going to be tricky, and it's going to feel a little strange to go from what we know that is safe to what is foreign and actually really safe, but it's going to feel weird. And often people will say when they get into this work that they know that this is good for them and they even feel the benefits in their system, but everything about it feels wrong. And that actually is a good sign to me when I hear that, because that means that they're rewriting, they're redrawing this new map of safety. That in order for it to stick, it has to be revisited over and over and over again. And this is where, and I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the program, Smart Body, Smart Mind, is not just a 12-week program. That is when we are together live in the curriculum, when I am there, when my team is there, there's lots of live support. It's like we're doing an infusion, if you will. We're getting a lot done in 12 weeks so that you can then go off and continue the learning on your own, continue to rewrite that safety map so that the system can really stick. If we end the learning at 12 weeks, then we're not continuing to feed that new pattern, that new level of neurology, if you will, and biochemistry in the system. We have to keep moving forward. It's kind of like the classic example I always give is, and this goes well with this question a little bit here, is exercising and eating well, right? We can't just decide to do that 12 months of the year, and then at the end of that 12 weeks, I should say, 12 weeks, 3 months, and then at the end of that 3 months, we say, okay, I've done all I need to do, I've eaten lots of vitamins, I've gotten lots of exercise in, and now I'm going to stop, and then I'll wait until next year to do it again for 3 months. And unfortunately, that's kind of how humans have learned due to the way that we've been taught in our school systems, right? School is from usually, at least in the hemisphere where I am, the northern one, it's September to around June or May. That's when we are learning, quote unquote. And then summer, we take it off and we have fun and we don't think about learning, and then we go back into it into September. And that doesn't work. We need to have this all year round. And that's sort of the beauty, again, of Smart Body, Smart Mind, is while we are in live session for 12 weeks, the program content and the material you get to keep even when we're not in live session. Okay. Am I sounding okay, you guys? Someone said there's a bit of an echo. I haven't had anyone else tell me, so I'm just going to keep going and pretend that we're okay. If there is an echo, what you can do is go away and then come back and rejoin. That can sometimes help. Let me take a little bit of water here. Sharon says, let's see if this is a question. Hello again. Where did we go here? Sorry, you guys. Here we go. All right, I'm getting there. You are from Illinois. Wow, is there really a city called Normal, Illinois? Cool. So what I hear you saying is that this is good to do alongside one-on-one work. Yes, it is. And what about things such as Reiki? 100%. All of it is fair game, Sharon. And the thing I think, and I'll read the rest of it, is that in the way that we have treated the human condition and the healing of it, and I'm going to kind of lay a foundation here. We tend to see healing the human body like a medical problem. And in the past, this has been the way that we have discovered medicine. You have an infection, we've discovered how to clean a wound and to give antibiotics, and then the infection goes away, and then you stop the antibiotics. And when a wound is cleaned and healed, you don't have to keep cleaning and putting, ointments on it. It's done. If you break a bone, same thing. You might go to the hospital, you might get a cast, it might get reset, you heal it, you let it rest, you might do a little bit of physio, but if those processes are done well, you don't have to keep the cast on. You don't have to keep treating that broken bone, for example. So this has been a very common way that we have treated the human system. There's a problem, we fix it, the problem goes away, we go back to life as if nothing had happened. I used that example a second ago about diet and exercise. That is something that you don't just do for a week or two and then you're done. It's all the time. So when you ask the question about Reiki or doing one-on-one work, usually we're not going to the therapist every single day, 24 hours a day. We're not doing a guided meditation or a Reiki session 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Same with massage, right? We aren't having, although that might feel nice, we're not being massaged 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We wouldn't get anything done, right? So there's certain things that are like, this is for getting this done, this is for getting this done, this is for getting this done. Smart body, smart mind, and the work that I teach you within it, the nervous system health, being your own medicine, becoming an apprentice of your nervous system is one of the favorite ways I like to say it. That is always with us. Always. We want it to be always there. It's not something that we just, well, some people will, I will admit, but it is a constant awareness. It's like learning a language. It's like learning a second language as an adult. I use this analogy quite a few times, is to get really, really proficient. If I wanted to say study German, which I've tried, and it just never works because I'm not in Germany or in Austria or any of these countries where they speak German, I would need to learn the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s. I would need to learn sentence structure and phrases and paragraphs. I'd need to learn how to read it, but also hear it and speak it. And if I really wanted to become fluent, it'd be best for me to go to a country where that is all they speak and I'm having to fumble through and figure it out. And I would want to be always in that mindset of that language. So this nervous system stuff, we want to be doing this all the time. And it doesn't have to be in an exhaustive way. So for example, as I'm talking to you, I am aware of the wind outside. I can hear my husband in the background. I can see your comments. I'm feeling my bum on my stool here. There is this level of awareness that we have that we can cultivate that is often not there because we've been disconnected. So the work will influence the one-on-one work that you do. It will shift the Reiki work that you do. I know when I was young, I had some acupuncture sessions, for example. I've talked about this before, and I don't think I really knew what was going on. I didn't know how to feel energy in my body when I was in my early 20s. I was just not in this work the way I am now. Now that I have this knowledge of feeling and tracking sensations and bubbles and all these things, when I do have an acupuncture session, it is that much more potent because I am online feeling all of the energy pathways in my system. So it's the same with you, and I've seen and heard from my colleagues who do private work, one-on-one work, so trauma work with people one-on-one, and the people that they see who have done Smart Body, Smart Mind, or the 21-day nervous system tune-up, which is another one of my programs. It's a starter course. They have said that those individuals are a little quicker to work with, often, not always, but often, because they have a foundation set. They understand the theory of what's going on in their system, and it's a lot easier to just get in and do the work, right? And I developed this program, just a bit of history for you guys. I developed this program because I was in private practice and it wasn't enough to see someone once a week or twice a month, because then they would leave and they would have no tools to continue to study the work. So in essence, the program, Sharon, SBSM, is really about how you work with yourself on your own, in your own time, learning the language of the nervous system, and really getting a real good understanding of what is happening in the biology and why, and then knowing how to work with it, not just in times of stress and in times of traumatic experiences, but when we feel good as well. And I think it's really important to really listen to the system and know how it feels when we're feeling a little bit better, because that informs us and gives us resource for when we're not feeling better, or not feeling as great, I should say. And then your other part of the question, you've been interested in the program, but you are more apprehensive being online and in a big group. I'm currently overwhelmed with grad school and dealing with my own PTSD. Grad school's a hard one, isn't it? I don't think anyone can be prepared for grad school. I went through that too. So here's what's interesting. The group is as big or is as small as you want it to be. So when you are learning online, you can choose to show up to the calls live, or you listen to the recordings afterwards. The beauty of the recording, and really a live call, because you can turn off a live call too whenever you want, just like you could say goodbye to me on this live stream and come back in 10 minutes if you need to take a break, or you can turn the volume off, that kind of thing. So if you're in one of my lessons, if you're learning a audio lesson, a practical lesson, maybe you're watching one of my live lectures, if you start to sense in your body, that's enough for today, here's what's cool about online. You can press pause, make a note of where you left off, and come back to it the following day or later that evening. Whereas when you are in school and you're showing up at a lecture, maybe they do this these days, I don't know if they record lectures, but you pretty much have to stay for that whole lecture, or you've got to find someone else's notes afterwards. I don't know if kids still do that, but that was the difference, right? Is in-person learning, you had to show up, whether you were sick or tired or didn't want to be there, you had to show up. Again, the beauty of it being online is you can show up when it suits you, when you have the energy, and if you only have energy for 30 minutes and the session is an hour long, you just do 30 minutes. Or you do 15 minutes and then you do the other 15 later that day. So I would really encourage you, if you're being drawn to do SBSM, I do think if you are going through grad school right now and you know you have post-traumatic stress from early experiences and you can do this right now, I would encourage you to, because my sense is you're going to have some really good resources, good support, and it's just going to build up that foundation. And you already are doing a lot of good work, so this is just going to heighten that to a whole other level. So I hope that answers your question, Sharon, and just remember that tomorrow is our deadline, so if you can, get in today. Okay, thanks there. Looks like the sound is going okay. Just going to have a little more liquid. Hey there, Marloes, one of our alumna, listening in from the Netherlands. Great, I'm glad that was helpful, Sharon. Tina asks, you're from Illinois, hello. Oh, another Illinoisan. Is that how you say it, Illinoisan? Do you know about holographic memory resolution? If so, can you talk about this and if it is helpful alongside of SE? I do not know holographic memory resolution specifically. If I read those words, I can maybe make a guess that it's about going into our memory banks. A hologram is something that's very three-dimensional and is living and breathing. I actually, when I teach, I will often say to my students, try to see this as a hologram. I do say that because when we're going in and bringing intention into, say, our kidney, adrenals, and our gut and our brainstem and these different levels of our physical body, we have to see and visualize our system in a three-dimensional, juicy, robust way. And so my sense is that work has to do with past experiences and resolving them by seeing them in light and plain day, etc. So maybe I'm on to that, maybe I'm not. You can maybe confirm with me, Tina. But as I just said to Sharon, yes, I believe that the somatic experiencing work, the program that I've developed, which is more than somatic experiencing, I want to be very clear. I have training in 3 very solid methodologies. One is somatic experiencing, one is the Feldenkrais work, which was developed by Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais. He was kind of like touted as the first ever neuroplastician. He was one of the first people to really say, this brain of ours can change. It doesn't have to stay in the state of a stroke. For example, if someone has a stroke, we can recover that. We used to not think that was true, and now we know we can completely recover. Not completely, it depends on the severity of the injury, the brain injury, but there's a lot that can be recovered that we used to thought was not possible. So there's that, and then there's the work of Kathy Kane, somatic practice. So I do believe that all practices, whether it's general psychiatry, whether it's Reiki, as someone just asked, whether it's Chinese medicine, whether it's, as I mentioned, learning a second language, the more in tune we are to our biology and how our inner systems work, and I haven't mentioned this yet in this call today, our survival stress. So if we are living in survival energy, those fight, flight, and freeze responses, it is very hard for other forms of advanced work to stick. And this is a hallmark, if you will, a real unique part of Smart Body, Smart Mind, is we are teaching you the proper sequencing of how to become connected to the mind and the body and the environment. We don't go into advanced practices. It would be like that example I gave about me learning to speak German. It would not be good if you plunked me into the middle of a Bavarian town where no one spoke English. I would be lost. I wouldn't know how to speak and communicate. In this work, it's similar. We don't want to plunk you guys into advanced practices of retrieving memories and our biggest traumatic experiences until I know that you know how to find those ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of nervous system awareness, of sensing the physical body. One of the reasons we get re-traumatized, and I hear about this a lot when people go to even, psychiatrists, psychologists, workshops where they try to conjure up your biggest, scariest event ever in front of a room of strangers, and a person will go into massive overwhelm or they're going to shut down. And the reason why is as you start to bring up these really scary experiences, and if the system doesn't have the robustness to handle all of the sensation, all of the emotion, all of the physical feeling that gets brought back up from that bad, scary experience, if we don't have the capacity to hold that and hold it in the speed that it might come at us like a freight train, our system's going to either collapse and shut down, or it's going to blow apart and it won't be able to pick up the pieces. And we hear this a lot where people do too much, too soon, too fast, and then the system kind of, in a sense, breaks down. We don't want that. So often people ask, will this help if I'm also doing this other thing? And as I mentioned to Sharon, 100% yes. And I'll speak really candidly too in regards to how even going into a training, like there are a lot of people I know here who might be already practitioners within the healing and helping fields. And from what I've seen, when we go into, say, a somatic experiencing training, which I have done and gone into, and the Feldenkrais trainings, or maybe it's a massage therapy course or something like that, even yoga teacher training, there's not usually any time dedicated to working on your own stuff first. It's assumed that you have a robust, strong, regulated nervous system. To be honest, I don't even think it's assumed. I don't think anyone even questions that. And so if we can have the time to work on ourselves for a structured period of time, learning these skills that maybe we didn't get during those first few years of life, and if you're here and you're curious about this work, chances are you didn't get it, and that's fine. Everyone has had variations of not getting those solid, secure attachments when we were young. It's important to do this as adults. And the reason why, from what we've seen with the research, when we have got unresolved stress in our system, unresolved traumatic events still lingering inside, the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, has really shown us that, if not treated, will most likely create some form of illness, mental illness, chronic illness. If the genetic predisposition is in us, it will be expressed when there is excessive toxic stress still sitting in the system. So this is kind of new information, but the ACE study has really shown us that. There's a great TED Talk, a woman named Nadine Burke-Harris. We can pop it up here. She is a pediatrician in California out of Oakland, and her talk talking about the ACEs and the strong connection between early stress in life and adult illness is compelling, and more of us are talking about this, and it's getting a bit more traction, but it's still fairly new, this idea. I'm going to get back to a question here. Oh, this is an easy one from Paula. Are there continuing education credits? So what we do, Paula, this is not a certified program that's recognized by the government or by massage therapy boards or psychology boards, but knowing what I know and it being associated with various organizations with my own training, if you prove the case that what you're doing is contributing to your learning as maybe a therapist or a body worker, we will give you a certificate with the hours of the training and the learning if you complete the whole course, and then you can use that to show to your employer or maybe to your board or your guild that you've gone through this program. And that is what some people have done. Everybody's different with continuing education credits. Sometimes it is an honor system and you can choose what your CEUs are, and then you just have to prove with receipt of purchase and show the program that this is what you've gone through, and make the case. And at least I've had that with my own work and training, and it's always worked. So you would know on your own what it is that your people need. Okay. Hey, Miyoki. You said I have a surgical trauma in my belly and I'm having difficulties to touch it. I think that's what you meant. Would you recommend to have it touched in order to heal? So yes, and we need to build up the capacity to be touched. So this comes back to what I was mentioning about 5 minutes ago, where I said it's important to sequence our healing. I call it neuroplastic healing sequencing. This ability to build up capacity so that when we do something that is maybe more advanced, or we go more directly to the event in our mind or the trauma that happened, that our system is open and receptive and that it doesn't shut back down. So I can't say to you, yes, you should have it touched, because if your system is not ready for that, and if the sensation in the rest of your body isn't turned on and online, then it could be not the best thing to go right into that source, right into that area of impact directly. And so again, this is where each of us has to be intelligent with what our body can handle, where it's at, the level it's at, and then what you need to do to ensure that that part of your system is ready for that kind of interaction. In Smart Body, Smart Mind, we do a lot of work. I'm always showing you my hands, where I'm guiding you with your own hand to go to parts of your body and to feel and to draw intention and attention to parts of the system. And with that, you can start to do a lot of healing touch work with yourself. And this is where, if there has been abuse or physical violence or even medical procedures, as you've said, where we've been intruded upon, whether we're conscious or unconscious under anesthetic, it can be very, very triggering to have someone touch us. And often we're not even aware that our system is going into override and into protection mode. This is what's also interesting, is many of us don't realize that we have got this sort of, it's like a blanket of what we would call functional freeze in our system, where we're there, but we're not 100% there, because we've had to create a barrier or a coat of armor around us because something occurred to us that was scary and not safe. part of getting our healing back and part of getting our resiliency back and our aliveness, really getting that juiciness back, is not just ripping off the armor in one big go, because that would be detrimental to safety, but slowly starting to dissolve it with these gentle exercises that reconnect you with your physical system, and then the emotions and maybe the memories that come with it, but in a very slow, drop by drop manner. So hopefully that answers your question there, Miyoki. Hey, Tina. Good. You say this makes so much sense and you hope to do SBSM at some point. You cannot afford it right now. That's totally fine. You're in shutdown a lot and you work in the field. So definitely keep learning. Of course, know that there's a payment plan too for Smart Body, Smart Mind. And if you haven't, and if that still can't work for you, next year we will run again. If you can start the 21-day nervous system tune-up, that program has been curated from SBSM, and that is a lower fee course, and there's also a payment plan there. So be sure to check that out. Crystal can pop up the link for you, and that is a great way to get started if SBSM is out of your range right now. Okay, I'm going to get to a question that was put into email, so let me just make sure and do some double checking here. Okay. This is from email, and the person has watched many of my Q&As. Awesome. Lots of my YouTube videos as well. So I'll read it all out just so that we have all the information here. So you say, I believe the intention of the program is to bring regulation and more capacity to our nervous system, which impacts all other systems of the body, creating overall better health and happiness. Yes, that is definitely the intention of the program. And part of working with the nervous system is working with the actual physical structures of the body, our movement, our intention, and learning. So a big part of SBSM is also education as well as practical. And so when we are bringing more awareness to our body, to how we think, to how we move, which is a big part of SBSM, it's more than just working with the stress responses, right? It's really working with movement, really working with touch, really working with our intention, listening to our breath, shifting our breath into different parts of the body. So I'll make that really clear, is we're working with the nervous system through these other bodily experiences. And the reason why is the nervous system is kind of invisible, right? It's like air. We know the air is around us, right? Oxygen and all of that, but we can't touch it and see it and feel it, but it's there. And so the nervous system it's here, it's everywhere, and it even feeds out into the environment. And so part of, I believe, the beauty of the work is getting into all these different elements of human experience, and most importantly, how we connect to the environment. If we don't bring our physical system in connection to the environment, we're missing half of the learning, if not 100% of the learning, because humans cannot survive without the environment. We need it, right? If this oxygen wasn't here, none of us would be here. If the people around us weren't here, we wouldn't be here. We need the environment to stay alive and to live. And so part of our traumatic experiences, and I'm going to get into the next question here, or the second part, our traumatic experiences often, if not always, have come from the environment, right? If it was a birth trauma, it was the environment pushing on us or something pulling us. If it was physical abuse, mental, verbal, it was something from the outside coming at us. If it was a car accident, same thing, something coming at us. Falling off of our bike as a kid, we fell, the environment is what broke our wrist. I use that example a lot because that's what happened to me when I was 5. So the biggest difference, one of the biggest differences, and I want to talk about this because I haven't talked about this that much, is we have to bring the environment in to the connections with our physical body, our emotions, our behaviors, our movements. And in SBSM, we're constantly, or at least I am constantly, folding the environment in over and over again. Because if we don't keep folding it in while we're noticing these emotions, these images, these movements, these behaviors, our breath, we're missing a very big part of what caused harm to us in the future. And for us to heal that, we have to start seeing the environment as not a dangerous thing, as something that actually we can work with. Does that make sense? If you've never done the work, I understand it might be a little elusive, and yet this is why we have the sorts of successes we do, which is I've never considered paying attention to myself in relationship to the environment like that. And when we slow it down and we really feel it, that's where these shifts start to occur that some might say are miraculous. And really, to me, they're not necessarily miraculous. They're just folding in what has always been there. We've just never bothered to notice it in our self-healing practices. So I hope that makes sense. So back to this question. You ask if one has lived with unresolved trauma and childhood trauma and dysregulation for years, and the body is now expressing in the form of chronic illness, can the nervous system ever be fully restored and regulated? Basically, once a chronic illness has set in, will there always be some form of dysregulation? This is a really great question. And I'll speak candidly to this because we have had some students who have healed massive chronic illnesses. Their blood work has changed. Their ability to eat foods that they've never been able to eat it's gone. And they were told that they had these chronic illnesses. Now, everyone's different, and it depends, I will admit, on the severity of the early childhood trauma, of the abuse. If I think about my husband, Seth, some of you know him, Seth Lyon, he's a colleague and my husband. He moderates a lot of the comments within our Facebook groups. He's also in private practice. He's also a somatic experiencing practitioner. He came from a really bad childhood. Physical, emotional, mental abuse, mother mentally unwell. It wasn't good. And when I met him, he would have been classified as having irritable bowel, massive social anxiety, addiction, and really it would be called complex PTSD. He wasn't well, and yet he had a spark of life in him, right? There's a reason I was attracted to him, even with all of these things. And so he has done immense healing in the 10 years that we've been together. It's taken time. Has it taken all 10 years to shift all those things? Of course not. And when we are under more stress, when he's under more stress, he does have a tendency to fall into a tiny little bit more dysregulation, because that was his early map. His imprint was dysregulation. And he has shifted so much through the work, the somatic work, the mind-body work, the physical work. He's very strong in his exercise routine. His diet has improved, of course. His relationships are much better. He's distanced parts of the family that are still toxic to him and trigger the old stuff because they're not doing their healing. So that's another big part that I haven't mentioned and not a lot of people ask is, what if I'm still living in an abusive situation? That will make it harder, much harder to heal. But if I think about him and I look at the shifts that he's made, given the circumstance he was given, and he was already in his late 30s when he started this, I should say mid 30s, a lot has healed. And so that's one case. I don't know all the specifics of your history, and the person wanted to remain anonymous, which is totally fine. But I'm giving you that story just to show you that some very severe dysregulation, chronic illness, complex PTSD, social anxiety, these are all of the things that Seth was living with when I met him. We could not go to a restaurant that was loud ever in the first sort of, 6 years that we were together. And now he can. And his limit stops before mine. I don't find those environments disruptive because I did have solid regulation. My traumas came afterwards. Mine were shock, mine were chemical based. So I had a different sort of traumatic upbringing, different from his. So for you, that would be more similar to how my husband was brought up and then had these chronic illnesses. What I can tell you is that when we kind of go full steam ahead and we make a real conscious decision, I want to change this, I deserve to change this, I deserve to be better, and we have the social support structures in place, and we make sure that we eat well, that we exercise, these things are very important, all of the system is being shifted and changed. So SBSM is definitely going to give you those baseline foundational tools, and then you have to have the drive to maybe recognize, let's say relationships that aren't serving. Maybe some dietary shifts have to happen. We don't go into that in SBSM, but general healthy eating is really what I recommend. Activity is important. And I know with chronic illness, there could be pain involved, joint stiffness, but moving little bits is better than none. One of the beauties of SBSM, we bring in movement. There's also some beautiful bonus lessons with my colleague Elia Marak, who does very gentle Eastern medicine, Qigong, Tai Chi based practices. That is given and gifted to you throughout the 12 weeks. He does 6 lessons throughout, and so they influence and impact the other work you're doing with me. So to go back to this, once a chronic illness has set in, will there always be some level of dysregulation? In some ways, yes, and we can improve and heal that to the point where the system is highly regulated and everyone is different. I wish I could just say in my crystal ball here, yes, this is what's going to happen in 3 years and 2 months, or this is what's going to happen in 14 months and 2 weeks. I can't do that. Wouldn't that be a lot easier? I can't. And so you have to gauge your healing based on you. And what we know, though, is that if we don't work at this level somehow, whether it's with me or you work with a somatic experiencing practitioner who is trained to work with early trauma, there is a difference. So you need to ensure that you've got those pieces with a practitioner. However you decide to do it, it comes back to restoring capacity, being with the body, and being able to notice when the system is going into more hyper arousal or when it's in a more depressed hypo state. And when we've got a chronic illness, when we're living with a chronic illness, typically we have already reached that point where the system has shut down. This is sort of hallmark of chronic illness, is we've had all of this stress growing up, and it's too much to handle. It's too much to feel that intense activation all the time for years. And so the system has a very sophisticated safety device, which is shut down, and it numbs us out. The trouble with that numbing is that under that numbing, that survival energy of fight flight is still there in the system. And then that's what creates, from what we have understood, these chronic conditions that usually pop up a little later in life, depending on a person's level of health, how they take care of themselves, and their relationships. They can come on as soon as teenage years or in our 20s. So it really depends on all these other factors within our environment. So bottom line, I hope that story has helped some people here understand that this is an ongoing lifestyle shift. And if I go back to my husband, Seth, he isn't going to stop the learning and the healing. And it's really important for everyone to understand that. And I'll speak candidly again. I have moved through some intense old traumas just in the past 2 months. Things that I thought I had dealt with years ago. And then I had a bodywork session with my cranium that opened up the probably hundreds of whiplashes I was exposed to as a kid with my sport, and falling and just being, put into a shock position and state. And I had some pretty intense symptoms for 2 months. I had some pretty severe pain. I had vertigo. I couldn't sleep very well. and I'm regulated still. Even with those symptoms coming up, my system maintained its regulation, right? And so that's just another example, because a lot of people will think, I'm going to do this work and then I'll be done with every single trauma in my life and I'll be perfect. And it doesn't work that way. And it doesn't work that way because there are so many layers to the human experience. And if you have the tools and the skills to know how to feel and notice these things, you will recognize them as, oh, wow, this is that whiplash that I never dealt with, or this is that time that I couldn't speak up and I'm now faced in the same situation, and all of a sudden I feel these tears. This must be the tears that I never cried because I was embarrassed and I went into shutdown. Those are just some basic examples that are hypothetical. But I hope you get my drift, is that when we have the skills on board, we are better able to take care of ourselves moving forward in life. And it's not like, for those of you that were here at the very beginning of my call about an hour ago, remember I made that example? This healing is not like I have an infection or a cut, I'm going to address it, take antibiotics, and then it's done and it's healed forever. This is different. And I'm repeating myself a lot here because there's been confusion in the past that healing the nervous system happens and then you're done. From what I've seen, that is not the case. It is like, as I said, learning a language. It's like becoming good at a skill and mastering a skill and getting better and better and better. It's like healthy eating. It's like being active. It's like improving our relationships. Anyone who's in a successful marriage or partnership knows that you can't just be really good for the first 2 years of your marriage and then say, okay, I'm done being good and working on this. We're just going to not work on this anymore. It's constant work, with the hope and the intention that with that constant work, that relationship, that connection gets deeper, it gets richer, it gets easier. And working with the nervous system, it's kind of like that. You're building a relationship with your own system, getting stronger and stronger with it, so that you can have this bigger capacity to do bigger and bolder things. Okay, I get excited about this stuff because I really want people to understand what this is and what it isn't. It's very important to know that. Okay, another question from the same person, which is a good one. Can the nervous system be restored to regulation even if disease has set in? I have seen that, yes. And of course, I don't know if there's a specific disease you're talking about. I've met people, who have shifted cancer naturally. I'm not saying that that's how everyone should do it. I've also seen people shift cancers with the medical model, and then they bring in the prevention and they work with their shit. They work with their emotions. They work with the stored traumas because they know if they don't, it's going to come back. There are certain things though, and this isn't really disease. There are certain true genetic defects, like if someone has sickle cell anemia, or someone is born with Down syndrome, or if someone has the many diseases that are true chromosomal defects. That is a little different, I will admit. However, I have seen people that have gone through SBSM with, say, type 1 diabetes, where the pancreas no longer produces insulin. And some of these people have said, if I hadn't have done Smart Body, Smart Mind, I would not maybe be alive anymore because I couldn't listen to my body's needs for insulin in the tuned way, in the fine-tuned way that they can now, right? And we know that a lot of people who do suffer from, say, type 1 diabetes, they get into trouble because they're not feeling their bodies. They don't realize that their foot is infected because of lack of circulation. They don't feel. And so when we bring the feeling back, some of these things that might be considered, that's it, we're done, can be enhanced. These systems can be improved upon. It does not mean that that person can stop taking their insulin. They still have to take it, but they're becoming more intelligent with their system. And the stress that is in the body is being dealt with. And we know that when we deal with our stress, the traumatic stress, the immune system enhances, it improves. So again, there's specific things that are genetic that we're born with them, like something like a blood disorder, a clotting disorder, Down syndrome. Those are just the two that are popping into my head right now. And then there are certain things that are there because of the system being broken down due to traumatic stress locked in the system. And the question, the person here asks, is there a point at which the system has gone too far and we can't fully recover? Of course. I've worked with some people who have had Parkinson's who were just too far down the rabbit hole. Might not be the best way of saying that, but their illness has impacted so many other systems in the body, and they just didn't get on top of it soon enough. And yes, of course, there's going to be instances where the system has gone too far, and that doesn't mean that we can't still work to enhance and improve what has already occurred to the system. And there's a great book actually called Dying to Be Me. Anita Muraji, I think is her name. She was in that point where she was on her deathbed in a hospital. She had cancer in every single part of her body. And she had what some have considered a miraculous healing. And she's an interesting one. It's an interesting book to read because it shows the power of the mind. It doesn't talk so much about the stress levels and trauma, but it is a good example of something or someone who was at that point where there really was, someone would say, there's no way this is ever changing, and it did. And so I'm very careful with my words because I don't want to put false hope into people's heads, and I also don't want to underestimate the power of our human healing system. I don't think we fully know how things work in the human body to the degree that we think we do. And I do know that when someone's mind is made up, that will often dictate what occurs. So if someone's mind has a bit more of a realistic expectation of, you know what, I want to try this. I want to see if this can make a difference, and not in a way that is, Gabor Mate, someone that I quote often, will say, negative thinking can be actually very positive. And by that I mean you don't want to be reckless in how you proceed with your health, but you need to be realistic, and you have to bring in as much hope as you can and work on what is happening. But there needs to be a kind of a pragmatic, this is a situation and this is what I need to do, and this is what I also need to do to make sure these other pieces are taken care of. So our mind plays a huge role, and it also has to play a role in a way that is realistic and hopeful. So we got to juggle those two balls at the same time. Okay. There's a question here that came in our Facebook group, and I'm going to answer it. It's from Therese. And she asks, one of the symptoms I have is restless legs. And they have, she said, chronic fatigue syndrome, which again is classified as what we would consider in my field of work a chronic illness, a syndromal illness. And it's a byproduct of the nervous system being in override, this fight, flight, freeze, and the system basically breaking down. And actually, I'll get Crystal to pop up a much older video of mine. It's like 4 years ago. It's when I first started teaching online, and I describe the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems and how when they're both turned on at the same time, that is what, from what we've seen, creates these symptoms, which can then create a more robust syndrome, which we then might call an illness, a chronic illness. So check that one out. It's like how chronic stress creates chronic illness. Stored traumatic stress, I should say. So a little bit of a side bar there. So you say, Therese, that you've got restless legs, and restless leg syndrome is the sympathetic fight-flight system knocking on our door. And usually it happens at night when we try to sleep, and we feel this activation, and it can be painful. if we don't know how to move that movement and that quality out. So there's an urge for the muscles, an urge that the muscles jerk, and there's also a heaviness in the legs. So this is what you said here, there's a desire to jerk, so that's to move, and then there's a heaviness. That heaviness, that is probably the shutdown response, trying to shut off that fight, flee response that the legs want to do. But also when I lay down to relax or meditate, my body sometimes starts to shake. Yes, so this is again what I spoke about. Forgive me, I'm like going in spits and spurts for these questions, but it's important for me to lay context. So when we go to relax or meditate and there's a shaking that occurs, this goes back to what I was saying about how we need to sequence our healing. If there is sympathetic drive, energy in the system and we try to calm it down, our system is going to say, not right now. We have all of this energy and you're telling me to sit down and be quiet? What? It's like telling a kid who has all this exuberant energy, I need you to sit down and listen. And then they're like, in their seat, looking. This is the classic hallmark of attention deficit disorder. It's this inability to focus because underneath is all of this sympathetic, adrenal, survival energy that's wanting to get out. So that is what's most likely occurring when you are going to relax or meditate, is the system actually does not want to relax or meditate. It wants to get this energy out. So you say, last year I had a session of quantum healing and went into a very deep relaxation, and memories of an event from my father's generation came up. This happens. We know too that generational trauma can get passed down through our DNA into our current life. It's all very spooky, but that has been shown through research, so we know it's true. So throughout the session, my body shook and shook. Since that time, the tremors have lessened, so I suspect that for myself, my illness is in some ways connected to trauma on different levels. Definitely. I can't afford several quantum sessions. I can't afford several sessions of quantum healing or the full course here, but I'm wondering if the 21-day course could assist me in releasing more. 100% yes, Therese. And as I mentioned a second ago, the 21-day nervous system tune-up, it was curated from Smart Body, Smart Mind. It doesn't have the same robustness of working with the stress organs, working with the joints and the diaphragms, but it does give you the basic foundations of the nervous system, of the autonomic nervous system, and then key practices that are about reconnecting to the environment, to yourself, and then blending the two together. So if you can start with that, I recommend it, because then those lessons you can repeat over and over, and then they become just part of your life and world. And because you already have a pretty, from what I can tell, robust understanding and ability to track your system, you may find that that is a great way to start. The other thing to know is when you guys do start with the 21-day nervous system tune-up, the cost of that program, it's just under $300. That gets taken off in the future when you do Smart Body, Smart Mind. So if you're not ready yet to do Smart Body, Smart Mind, which is completely fine, you can start with that, and then next year when we run again, that cost gets taken off of Smart Body, Smart Mind's tuition. And if people know that they can start with SBSM right now, and they can start with maybe a payment plan. If you can, I do recommend that, because then you'll have that learning throughout the entire year, and you can get started with that curriculum now. So you got to feel into what works for you, what works for your financial situation, and obviously you got to do what feels right for your gut. So I'm going to come back to the questions here. Okay. Hey there, Kirsten from Denmark. You mentioned earlier the importance of bringing in the environment when working with traumatic experiences. Yes, and I'm building more resilience. It makes a lot of sense, but could you elaborate on that? Yeah, it's simple in some ways, and I mentioned the environment is all around us, always with us, and so when we had experiences that were not nice, that were traumatic, that environment is there with us. And usually those traumatic experiences came from the environment in some way, shape, or form. And so when we are learning, in at least the way that I teach this work in Smart Body, Smart Mind, I am constantly asking you, the student, to pay attention to that environment, to notice it. We notice it through the work of learning how to reorient to the environment, the sound, the senses, the feeling of, I'm not sitting on the ground right now, but the feeling of maybe the ground under us, if we're laying down on the floor, the ground against our back, our head, our arms, our legs, our feet. If we're on our side, same kind of thing. So really, this element of the environment is essential, and elaborating on it more than that is difficult, because it's something that we just want to bring in. And I'm not sure if there's another question with that, Kirsten, but we need to bring the environment into our experience when we are reconnecting with our physical body and noticing these levels that we work with in Smart Body, Smart Mind. If we're not bringing that in, what occurs is that when we say go out, I'll just use an example. So say you are working on some of the lessons within Smart Body, Smart Mind. We're working with the kidneys, the adrenals, feeling the stress response, shifting the stress response. We want to feel the ground under us, be oriented to the environment with us, around us while we're doing that, so that when we go out and say we're driving our car or we're on public transit and we have something stressful happen, or maybe we think of something stressful, we're doing so in relationship to that environment around us, and we can continue to listen to those stress organs, such as the kidney adrenals. If we don't practice connecting to the environment in the comfort of our own home when we're working on that stuff, the likelihood of us keeping that ability to pay attention to those areas will be much less when we go outside. I keep saying that because that's where my door is to my house, so outside. And so this is why we need to loop that environmental piece in when we're practicing, because if it doesn't continue when we go out, we'll lose that juiciness to be able to pay attention to those stress responses. As one example, it's the same with when we work with movement, right? We're doing a lot of movements, more Feldenkrais-based movements, where we're connecting the head and the spine and the pelvis and the way in which our spine moves and our orientation. And so if you think about it again, if I make the example, if you're driving your car, clearly you're sitting. If there's no connection to this for a 2-hour drive or stuck in traffic, this whole area has the likelihood to shut down and shrink up and get really tight and braced. But if we have that awareness to our body in relationship to the environment when we're working with it, when we're in that car, when we're in that traffic jam, when we're in whatever it is we're in, we can stay connected to that body, and it doesn't shrink up or brace in the same way. This doesn't mean that if, let's say, knock on wood, hopefully this never happens to anyone, but let's say we get into an accident, we want our body to brace, right? Because that's part of the stress reaction to protect. But then after that, we want to make sure that we're not staying stuck in it. And so this is where sometimes there's this confusion that doing this work means that we're never going to have a traumatic experience ever happen again, and that is not true. It's how we deal with those future events that becomes different, and when we know what to do with them, what do you think happens? They don't stick in the same way. All right. Okay, question from Fabrizio. Hello. I'm currently in intermediate level SEP training, and I will start. I guess the answer is obvious, but how will SBSM complement, interfere, or duplicate the SE training? I'm also going to start NARM this year. So NARM is the work of Larry Heller, for those of you that don't know, and Larry Heller was faculty within the Somatic Experiencing Training Institute. So he studied with Peter Levine way back in the day. So here's how it's going to complement. And I know based on what I've heard from my colleagues. So if I think about, I'll use Nicole as an example. She's one of our moderators in the 21-day group in the Open Healthy Nervous System Revolution Facebook group, and she's also within SBSM's group. She did Smart Body, Smart Mind when she was in her SE training, as did another moderator, Darcy, who some of you may not know as much because he comes in when we're in session live. They both did their training at the same time. They did SBSM at the same time, and both of them said to me, if I hadn't have done SBSM, I would have been absolutely lost in the SE training. And they meant that sincerely. And I think what occurs in the SE training, Fabrizio, is, as I mentioned maybe 30 minutes ago or 40 minutes ago, can't remember, there's no like pre-med version of going into the SE training. In other words, there is just this assumption that the students in the SE training are highly attuned to their bodies and that they're highly regulated and that they have this ability to feel all the nooks and crannies of their physiology in the training, and this is just not the case. If anything, it's the opposite. And so what occurs for those individuals is that they go through this curriculum in the SE world. I'm speaking because I've seen this in how I've assisted and just watched and heard people who come out of that training and they don't know what happened because it's bringing up lots of their own personal traumas and they didn't realize they were even there. This stuff comes up, and if they're not able to connect to their physical body and stay with it, the learning isn't as rich, because when we're trapped a bit more in this sort of survival stress, our higher brain isn't fully there. And so what often occurs is we go through these trainings and we're not really nuanced in our own physiology. So SBSM will definitely complement your training in SE and in NARM. If anything, it will enhance your capacity to be in the training and even be maybe a step ahead, which is actually not a bad thing, because then the basics that you're learning are just second nature. And so you then can really practice being there, learning the craft and skill to become an SE practitioner, rather than just sort of muddling through your own experiences that are being brought up from being in the field of the training, and of course all the other people there who are experiencing all of their unresolved traumas that they had no clue they had. I mean, I was in my training back in 2008 for 3 years, and I had zero clue what I was storing in my system. And I talk about some of these deeper experiences in SBSM. And, you know, I couldn't have told you that I was that disconnected when I started my SE training. I had no idea I was in functional freeze. I was a successful person in the world who had a business and had gone through grad school and had a great, you know, social relationship with people. I was not dysregulated, but I had this level of functional freeze in my system that got uncorked in my advanced training in the 3rd year. And if I had had what I have created in SBSM before, my sense is my system wouldn't have taken the hit as big. And so I would love it if people understood that a little bit more, and that they prepared themselves for these trainings a bit more, so that they get their money's worth, is really what it comes down to. Because there's many that will find that they have to repeat the training because they missed things the first time because they were working on their own traumatic experiences. So Fabrizio, I hope that hasn't scared you. I hope that's given you a little bit more insight. I do know that you will have huge benefit from doing SBSM, not only from the elements that are related to Peter Levine and Kathy Kane's work, but how the Feldenkrais work really blends in beautifully with those other practices. Yeah, I think it'll help you in many ways that you probably will not be aware of until you're in it. So thank you for that question. Hey Thea, can you speak about neurodiversity and somatic work in SBSM? Yeah, I won't speak too much about it, but for me, we are all diverse, and we're also all similar. And so what I've seen in the neurodiversity community, and I know it a little bit, is that when I've worked with folks who are in that kind of classification, and I've studied a lot around the highly sensitive person, I would be deemed that myself. There's a distinction that we need to make, and that is, we want to have sensitivity. We want to be diverse in how we are as humans because we're all very different. Our higher brain makes it so that we're different. Our biologies, however, are all very similar. When we strip it all down, we have this autonomic nervous system. We have a central nervous system. Our organs, while there's going to be some shifts and differences in the size and the structures of just how big they are based on our size, they all kind of work the same. And so a lot of this diversity is coming out, my hunch, is in how we were brought up, how we were parented, how our attunement was, how we were attached to as kiddos. And the human system is so sensitive and so intelligent that it will quickly shift without even realizing it to stay safe. Right? To stay in connection with that primary caregiver that is usually our mother and potentially our father. And so we shift to stay safe. If we don't have an attunement that matches, that is safe, we then start to become dysregulated. And I'm just speaking from experience, Dia, but what I've found is that many who would classify themselves as neurodivergent have dysregulation within their system. And I know that might sound a little harsh, but it's what I've seen. I've worked with a group of people who would classify as HSP, and when we really look at their system, their symptomology, they have got dysregulation within the system from usually something that occurred when they were very young that was never properly treated or healed. And I really believe that we're all sensitive, human, empathic beings, and this is our birthright, and that empathy, that sensitivity can become problematic when there is dysregulation with it. When we have regulation and we have empathic abilities, which I believe we all do, when we have sensitivity and there's regulation, things become a lot richer. They become more robust. We know how to set boundaries differently. Things don't seep into our system and we don't trap them. So thus far, to me, we all have a lot of complexity in our system, and I always use this example. It's kind of a strange one, but I'll explain it. If you think about animals in the wild, when they have their young, there's no question about what occurs. Right? If we look at how bears here in Canada birth their cubs versus bears in Siberia versus, the way that we have even geese down here near where I live, they have their little goslings. They treat them the same. They lick them. They make sure they have food. They keep them safe. They teach them the ropes. But there's no doubt about connection and protection, right? It's a very strong written script with animals in the wild. Humans are super different, and we're also, as I said, all the same in that we need food, shelter, care, attention, touch, connection, safety. It really is quite simple, but because of this higher brain of ours, because of our domestication as animals, as humans, the way we've domesticated plants and animals and agriculture, the way industry has seeped into our natural environment and habitat, we're in a situation where we're working with an environment that isn't natural to our biology. And so when that occurs, this is where we get these diverse ways that we see humans end up, whether it's positive or not so positive, right? But this higher brain, we haven't even begun to understand how creative and intensely intelligent it is. We know, but a lot of the brain function is being impacted by the survival stress that we're living in. And then this is where we get dysregulated patterns of, we would call it maybe neurodiversity, where it's not helping us. And so it really comes down to, can we build regulation with the system? Can we build more capacity within the nervous system? Can we heal the imprints that really harmed us when we were young, right? When we do that, some pretty cool stuff starts to play out and starts to occur. And I'm not big on labels, unless, of course, as I mentioned, if there's a true genetic chromosomal defect. If someone really, for instance, I use insulin as the example, is truly diabetic, then yes, that is a real, like, take your insulin, you need it or you will die, right? And so there are certain things that are truly, in my opinion, genetic, and then there are others that get expressed because the genetic predisposition is here, but they're being expressed because of stress and because of improper care when we were young. And so we have to be able to differentiate between the two and know which is it and which isn't it, and can we just make it really simple and know that at the end of the day, the human system wants to be well. It does not want to be swimming and living in survival physiology. And thus far, many that I've met who would classify as highly sensitive have a lot of dysregulation in their system. And so before we even classify, I like to say, can we allow the system to find more health through better regulation first, and then see what occurs? Then see what kind of creativity, what kind of nuance comes out. And usually we'll see true human individuality come out, which is great to see when it occurs. So I hope that's given you a little bit of an insight there. Those that know me know that I don't like a lot of the labels that are being used. It just complicates things. And I even know through conversations I've had with people that even Gabor Mate struggles with that term neurodiversity, because a lot of the time it's connected with dysregulation. So those are my 2 cents there. Hey Lisa, you say, I'm asking you this as I have an 18-year-old son with autism who's high functioning but suffers from extreme social anxiety. Do you think someone on the spectrum can benefit from your program? Of course, and it really comes down to this. This is true of any human. Are they interested? They have to be interested. So, you know, if he is someone that wants to learn and wants to connect with his system and wants to understand this a bit better, then 100%. But, you know, I have clients in the past who, usually it's the women asking, you know, we want our men to learn this. I say, that's fine, but they have to want it. We can't force feed this to anyone. So it's very important to know, you know, does he want to learn? Do you want to do the program and then just see? I found with parents often when they do the work themselves, this is really important for the parents. When they do the work themselves, the way in which they change and relate to themselves will indirectly and directly impact their kiddos in a way that's almost spooky, right? And so it depends on the age, it depends on the willingness, and you know your son better than me. So again, extreme social anxiety, that's something going on with the survival system that's saying this environment is unsafe. And so then I would have the question, if we were one-on-one, I would be like, well, was there any birth trauma? Was there in utero stress? When you were carrying, were you unhappy with something? Were you under stress? Was there a dynamic in your past generations? Because we know through some research, especially research done with Holocaust survivors and their offspring, that even when their offspring have not been subjected to the abuse and torture that their parents and grandparents went through in occupied Nazi Europe during the Second World War, that the anxiety levels and cortisol levels are higher in their kids and grandkids, even with good upbringing. And that epigenetic, right, that way in which that generation has carried that anxiety is real. It was highly unsafe for them. And so if that hasn't been healed at that level, that genetic imprint gets passed on to the offspring, the kids, the grandkids. So I ask you this, with full sincerity. Also, was there something in your own system that was under high stress? And it's important for the parents. It's so important for the parents to do this work, even when we have kids that are old and we interact with them, because they will feel it when we make the changes. So bottom line, Lisa, he's got to want it. He's got to be interested in it, just like any learning, right? A kid's not going to practice piano. I used this example with my team the other day. Like, we can give them the piano lessons, and if they show up for the hour and do the piano, great. And then if they have no desire to practice outside of that piano lesson, chances are it's probably not for them, right? So I'll use that analogy for your boy is, will this be more than just him sitting down at a computer doing the work because mom wants him to? Does he want to learn it for himself, right? Does he want to really play that piano and master it and figure it out, and he practices when he's not in the lesson? And so you will know that better than me. So that's how I would explain this to you and to anyone really who is interested in this work for their spouses, their significant others, their kids, their parents. There's something powerful about free will, and it also can be very hard when we want someone to be helped and they're just not ready for it in this lifetime. So do what you can, express the education, and at the end of the day, if you're here learning this, do it for yourself first and foremost. And there's a ripple effect that occurs no matter what happens, whether it's with him or other people in your life. I'm just going to check to make sure I haven't missed anything. My voice, I think, is about to go, so I'm going to pause for today. Thank you for the 38, 39 people that are still here with me. Quick recap. Smart Body, Smart Mind. This is my online program. We only open registration once a year. It begins on Monday. So tomorrow we're getting to the last few moments. Sunday is the last moment for you to sign up. If you know you want to get in and you've been holding off, get in today so you can start to familiarize yourself with the program, the materials. We will start bright and early at 11 a.m. Pacific time with our orientation call. I will be teaching within that call, so our first piece is immediately, and then we start with the program content proper the following Sunday, and then we go for 12 weeks. And then we end at the end of May. Our first week of June is an added sort of a wrap-up week. There are modules, 10 modules within this program, lessons that are practical, theoretical, integrative. We have Q&A calls like this through a format called Zoom. We also do Q&A on my Facebook page within our private Facebook group. We have lectures, training calls throughout the 12 weeks. There is support in the form of our Facebook group, which I just mentioned, and lessons that will last you a lifetime. So this is really a comprehensive program. I like to call it University for the Nervous System. At this point, I haven't found anyone yet who has offered this level of support and the diversity of the training. So remember, this is more than just the work of trauma release. This is the work of movement, of awareness, of intention, working with the organs, working with earlier traumas, rewiring the nervous system, teaching the system to find regulation again. There is a lot here. If you haven't yet read through and looked at the program site, the registration page, I highly encourage you do that. Take a little bit of time to look through, read through some of our client stories, watch some of our client stories on video. There's an FAQ page that has some robust answers to common questions. And that's it. So again, all the information is on the program site. Check it out. One more day to get in, and we run again in 2020. So if you know 2021, so if you know this is not the time for you, 100% fine. Start with my other resources. Start with my starter course. But if you're feeling in your gut that you would like to have this little bit of extra support, a robust curriculum, know that now is the time to get in. The other thing I'll mention is when we end at the end of the program it's about 13 weeks, the program is yours for life. So that means the website where this program lives It maintains all year round, and so that is like your home base where you go to learn, to review, to maybe check in on one of our Q&A calls. So you've got enough to work with for the whole year, which is pretty cool. And as a member, you become a lifetime member. So when we run again next year, you get to return and be a part of the group free of charge. It's just part of your membership. So thus far, we have hundreds of our alumni who've come back this year to repeat and redo the program. As I said, this is the 9th time we've run this program, so it is not our first rodeo. We've been doing this for a while. We've had people from 47 countries join. So again, this is a global thing. It's not going away anytime soon, and it will really teach you how to become your own medicine. So that is it for now. Thank you for being here. I'm going to end. And I will be doing a few more Q&As tomorrow at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Pacific. So if there's that one extra thing that you need to ask, you can show up there, or you can send us an email, support@irenelyon.com. We're also answering questions via my Facebook, this Facebook page, Messenger, so you can message us. Just give us, a little time to get back to you, but we will get back to you by tomorrow because we close tomorrow. So thank you, everybody. You're welcome. To all of you saying thank you, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.